Hello everyone, welcome to another video, and this time it's going to be an Iceberg video for the ARMA franchise, seeing as how my Barotrauma Iceberg video was such a success. ARMA 3 is a game that I did not yet review, but it is very close to my heart. So much so that according to Steam, since 2016, me and my wife combined sank more than 5,000 hours playing it. So naturally, it felt like it would serve as the next subject for an Iceberg video. Now I'm going to try and do my best to flesh out the stories of each game listed here, but it seems like this Iceberg was made more to highlight the franchise's general history, its community, controversies surrounding the games, and more. So we'll also dig into those in deeper portions of this video. So anyways, get comfy and let us begin with level 1. ARMA 3. ARMA 3 or Armed Assault 3 is a military sandbox game, the third entry in the series and one which propelled the military simulator genre or milsim to the place it is today. ARMA 3's story takes place on the two Greek islands called Altis and Stratus, located somewhere between Turkey and Greece in the Aegean Sea, and are modeled after actual islands. Later DLCs from ARMA 3 take the game to other locations such as Tanoa, a jungle archipelago in the Pacific Ocean, Argana, a desert land rich in resources in the Western Sahara region, Livonia, which is to my knowledge somewhere between Poland and Lithuania, and more. The background story revolves around the year 2035. NATO is crumbling after an economic crisis, while CSAT, an organization that rose in the wake of the Warsaw Pact's disillusionment, gains prominence. CSAT, which plays the role of opposing forces in ARMA 3, stands for the Canton Protocol Strategic Alliance Treaty, and is made up of mostly a more militaristic Iran that by 2035 wields a completely modern army on par of that with NATO, that has managed to position itself into becoming the leader of a broad conglomeration of nations, reportedly including Syria, Turkey, Pakistan, Iraq, and even China, and is able to call in units from other countries like Scimitar divisions from countries such as Algeria. The island of Altis, real name for Lemnos, sits smack dab in the middle between Greece, which is part of NATO, and Turkey, which is controlled by CSAT. Both forces try to exert control over the island using proxies. For instance, the AAF is initially represented as the official army of the Republic of Altis, and is later revealed to be nothing more than a puppet of CSAT, while the militias of the FIA are mostly supplied by NATO, be it in surplus arms or Spec Ops advisors such as those from the CTRG faction. If that doesn't work, then both sides might try to outright conquer and take command of the small island nation and use it as a staging base for either an invasion of Turkey or Greece, depending on who wins the war for Altis. The island of Altis, while being central to the main story, is also the background, or has a background, for civil unrest and rebellions from the time before the main conflict. The first Altian conflict or civil war raged between the year 2026 and 2030, with the two opposing forces being the Altian loyalists and the coup d'etat forces led by one Colonel Akentaros, who rebelled against the sitting government. After years of war, and despite much headway made by the loyalists in the first year, attrition and the ever-dwindling NATO supplies eventually forced their capitulation. In the year 2030, the Jerusalem ceasefire agreement was signed, ending the war for now. The peace that was signed was that of utter submission. Akentaros became the leader of the nation of Altis, and the loyalists basically ceased to exist as an army and a political entity. However, the victory gained was costly. Half of the population of the island was killed or wounded, many homes, villages, even towns lay in ruins from the fierce fighting. Almost immediately, post-war crackdowns began, and were so horrific it got to the point that the EU basically removed Altis from being a member of the EU. Sensing the vacuum left by NATO, CSAT stepped in to fill the gaps in both humanitarian aid and financial support. However, the rebels were far from being erased completely, with Akantaro's crackdowns serving to fuel the populace towards siding with the FIA instead of the AAF. Heavy fighting soon erupted yet again, forcing NATO to intervene as peacekeepers, and now, in the year 2035, the peacekeepers are evacuating the island as their tour of duty is about to end.
5 years have passed since bloody civil war was brought to an end in the Republic of Altis.
Thousands of families remain displaced, refugees scattered across countries around the Mediterranean.
The FIA are becoming increasingly desperate as AAF
With the U.S.-led peacekeeping deployment coming to an end of its mandate, NATO forces...
As millions of dollars of military equipment and infrastructure is decommissioned.
Opinion is split as to the wisdom of the drawdown.
In light of CSAT forces stepping up joint military exercises in the
The
Pacific.
U.S. is keen to reorient its conventional forces, reinforcing
Mediterranean basin representing a strategic fault line between crumbling European and
streets of Paris and Rome were ablaze last night as military and forces
Argue that the withdrawal could not come at a worse time.
AAF forces begin to consolidate their position on
the backing of Canton Protocol forces, equipment and training.
fire again was used as a platform to push the legitimacy of the government.
Parliament was recalled for an urgent debate and a vote over the possible redeployment of British peacekeeping forces.
Prime Minister Nicholas Ramsden said he would respect the defeat of his government's motion.
Effectively ruled out the possibility of any extension to
Gameplay-wise, ARMA is best known for its absolute freedom it gives to the player. Freedom to explore, freedom to use whatever means they can grab in order to accomplish their missions. The mission editor called Eden gives players the freedom to create their own missions, scenarios, even entire campaigns, and because of that there are many fan-made prequels and sequels to the game and to the main story, as well as countless other missions such as random mission generators that give random tasks for players to complete, or handcrafted scripted missions complete with their own stories. One other key feature ARMA is known for is its connection to the Steam Workshop. There you will be able to find mods that add everything you ever wanted. More weapons to use in missions, more tanks and aircraft to drive and bring the pain to your enemies, more islands to play on with varied biomes like desert, jungles, cityscapes, and even alien planets. You have mods that add Star Wars units, mods that add Halo units complete with the Covenant, future generic units with starships, musket-wielding redcoats, a famous Vietnam War mod that turned into its own DLC, and even Warhammer 40k mods complete with lore-accurate tanks, titans, and even space marines in true-to-life size, all of which are actually playable. Mods and multiplayer are what kept this game going for 12 years straight. And since we talk about mods already, let's talk a little bit about multiplayer. Multiplayer is where the majority of the community hangs out. You've got servers such as Altis Life for GTA style gameplay, Annex and Invade, which are vast randomly generated campaigns on Altis that anyone can join. You have hundreds of clans and groups who meet up to 3 times a week to do milsim operations and just have fun with each other, mostly with one guy acting as Zeus and keeping the action flowing for the rest of the guys. In Zeus, the player becomes basically a D&D dungeon master. Using a floating camera, Zeus can see where everyone is, create new units, change objectives, change the weather and time of day, and more. He controls the flow, spawning more enemies if the group progresses faster than expected, or deletes enemies if they get bogged down too much. He can also remote control units to give more difficult situations to the players, like barricading AI units inside buildings, which in the vanilla they won't do, play as a sniper to try and pin down the players, or command a tank or an emplaced weapon to keep their heads down. I have so much more to discuss about Arma 3, it basically deserves an entire review video of its own, but we have to keep moving, so let us continue to the next entry. Arma Reforger. Arma Reforger is the newest entry to the Arma series, brandishing Bohemia's latest iteration of the Arma franchise or the Arma engine, which is called the Infusion engine. The name Reforger is an acronym for Return of Forces to Germany and references to a yearly NATO military exercise that had US forces join forces with European forces to participate and simulate a Warsaw Pact invasion into Western Europe to see the technical and logistical issues such a scenario presents and find solutions to said problems. The game itself basically launched as a tech demo for the Infusion engine, where Bohemia basically told the community that this is the future and that they invite players to join and try it out, and as such it had a rough start, but that seems to be in the past now as its community is continuing to grow every year. There is no story behind Reforger as there is no official single player campaign for it as of yet, but from what I gather, it takes place on the island of Averon, a fan favorite and one of the main free islands of Operation Flashpoint's story, which we will cover in a later entry. Apparently, just like Operation Flashpoint, US and Soviet forces find themselves clashing over control of this island and a few others in a small off-the-book conflict, so as to not make these small skirmishes blow up into full-blown World War III. I mentioned the game had a rough start, and that is because many players complained how the game was basically bare bones. Only the Soviets, for instance, had a ground armored fighting vehicle, the BTR-60, while NATO only had trucks and Humvees. There were no helicopters, no armored forces to speak of, like tanks or APCs. The AI was horrendous, and until a recent update was unable to even use or drive vehicles, and it was mostly infantry duking it out in one of the game's main free game modes. Conflict, which is a PvPvE game mode where players fight the AI and other players for control of the map. Combat Ops, a return of Arma 3 game mode from one of its free updates. This is basically a co-op mission generator where small teams complete random tasks, and Game Master, which is basically Zeus and lets one player create custom scenarios for other players to play through. However, it seems that criticism did die down over time as more mod teams transitioned from Arma 3 to Reforger, and the game started getting constant mod updates and features, and nowadays it seems a much more complete game, with both sides having helicopters for fast troop locomotion as well as infantry fighting vehicles for infantry armor support. I've also already heard about mods that add zombies to the game, which, just like Arma 3, I assume should be absolutely horrifying to witness and fight against. So overall, the game is definitely moving in the right direction into becoming a legitimate entry of the Arma franchise. Arma 2. Now, disclaimer, I do not own Arma 2, therefore I am using footage from other sources which will be credited in the description. Arma 2 was the second entry to the Arma franchise, and a very important one since it was the entry that solidified Bohemia's position as the masters of the milsim genre, being able to weather out fierce competition from old colleagues turned rivals. The game took place in a fictional land called Chernos, which is supposed to be somewhere in the northwest corner of the Black Sea. Here it is called Green Sea for some reason. The story goes that in the former Soviet Republic there is much turmoil. A faction known as the Chernarushian Movement of the Red Star, or CHDKZ, laid siege to the government forces, overrunning a place called South Zagoria and even killing the president. To stabilize the situation, US Marines are sent as part of Operation Red Harvest to help well, again, stabilize the situation and restore order to the nation. The game also has several expansion packs and additions, such as an alternative timeline campaign called Eagle Wing, where the US invades Chernarus and drives out the CHDKZ and their Russian allies from Chernarus. Later expansions, such as Operation Arrowhead, takes the game to the fictional Afghanistan-like country of Pakistan, where one Colonel Muhammad Aziz faces a civil war fighting against royalist tribes that threaten his regime. In response, Aziz makes a threat to use Scud missiles armed with chemical warheads against the Green Sea nation of Kazakhstan if they refuse to submit to his demand and hand over a region called Karmakut. Oh, I get it. This promotes a UN response, sending a US-led NATO force to invade Pakistan and overthrow the ruthless dictator before he can carry out his attacks. ARMA 2 was a real pivotal moment for the ARMA franchise. It was hailed as a vast improvement over earlier ARMA titles, both in its groundbreaking realism and its ability to simulate a vast open world. The single-player campaign was hailed as a massive success, one which incorporated RPG elements into its gameplay, and while the game did present a significant difficulty curve compared to contemporary shooters of the time in the year of our Lord 2009, it gave a sense of accomplishment to the players who were up for the task. Other than that, the game was highly moddable. One such success story grown out of an ARMA 2 mod is DayZ, which started as an open-world sandbox zombie survival mode that throws the player somewhere random on Chernarus and forces him to survive by scavenging his surroundings. This mod caught the world by surprise and spread like wildfire in popularity, even spawning direct copies of itself, such as the scam known as the War Z. This mod is basically responsible for the open-world post-apocalypse survival multiplayer genre as it is known today, with every new entry basically trying to recreate the success first seen in DayZ. Lastly, ARMA 2 proved that Bohemia were the sole masters of the milsim genre for years to come, who, despite facing competition from old friends turned rivals, which is something we'll discuss about in later entries, are able to hold their ground and are able to rally huge communities behind their games to keep the ARMA franchise alive and way ahead of the competition in terms of content and quality of content available on offer. Okay, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Karmakut? Karmakut is one of the more well-known content creators for ARMA. Initially starting with ARMA videos, Karma has expanded rapidly, and now his page also includes other military games such as Escape from Tarkov, Ready or Not, which is the spiritual successor to the famous yet old SWAT series of games, and the World War II simulator Postscriptum. Not content with first-person shooters only, Karma also made several videos about the modern era RTS games such as Broken Arrow, where the player has a deck of units to call into the map and use to acquire new territory, ambush enemy forces, and eventually dominate the map or force the opposition to withdraw. I'll be honest, I spent very little time watching his videos, but from what I gather, he and his team play the style of absolute realism. This means talking on the radio in a proper language. It means memorizing objectives and locations. It means briefing the guys on who goes to where and does what, and then they go out to the target and execute the plan. This is 100% serious gameplay, one that puts the focus on immersion and teamwork. Personally, I was part of such ARMA groups in the past, and it's not much to my liking. This is because I am a reservist myself and I made the decision that I don't want to feel like I am enlisted again just to play my games, so I tend to stay away from such playstyles. But with a subscriber base of 700,000, I'd say Karma has gathered a large community around his content, and that I'm probably part of the minority of weirdos who play a milsim game for shenanigans. Also, last thing is that Karma has apparently gathered enough experience running ARMA servers and ARMA operations that he has announced his own realistic tactical shooter game called Bellum, which uses Unreal Engine 5 to bring the true feelings of what it's like to be in a firefight to the players, introducing an armor system where the player gets damaged depending on where they get shot and if the Kevlar stopped or did not stop the bullet. New medical system, which seems like more of an expanded ACE medical system for Arma 3, but much more fleshed out, and an immersive gameplay where guns both feel and sound impactful, as well as realistic reload animations, like how when you reload an MG, the character won't hold the MG in one hand like many first-person shooter games do, but instead place it on the ground until the reload is complete. There are many more features for the game Bellum that you can check out for yourselves, and we must continue on to our next entries. And now that we are finished with level 1, we are continuing straight down into level 2. Viper 10. Viper 10 is another Arma 3 content creator and a really cool guy, if I can say so myself. Don't hate me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember, Viper is a fighter pilot, and as such, his love is for content that is fighter plane, or aviation related in general. But what makes Viper unique though is that he took it upon himself the task no other man thought possible doing before, and that is reviewing Arma mods. There are, according to Steam, 37,000 mods available for Arma 3 to download from the Steam workshop, 20,000 compositions, which are sets of buildings you can use in the editor, and about 100,000 scenarios, 33,000 of which are single player. Covering even a third of all that requires Herculean amounts of time to cram into video format, and yet Viper does that with ease. Most of its videos are about new mods coming or existing ones in the workshop, and there is no real focus on certain mods or aspects. So if you made a mod for Arma 3, chances are it will show up in one of his videos. Viper has you covered on all modding aspects for Arma. You need new weapons, new gear, new vests, headwear, maybe even new weapon attachments, or what if you want new vehicles, new tanks to roll around in, new planes to fly, or even maybe you just new to Arma and you want recommendations on good single player scenarios to get a feel for what the game is without getting lost in the workshop. On all of these and more, Viper has got you covered. So if again you're new and you're looking to building a mod list that you want to play with the most, or just looking for recommendations of what's the latest and greatest in the workshop to add to your collection, Viper is your go-to guy. Lately, I believe he got a bit older. Some of his videos are not about mods or Arma content in general, but are more monologues that he calls rants, that mostly focus on the status of the gaming industry and how Arma stands in absolute contrast to many of the more popular arcade shooters. And don't get me wrong, I am 100% in agreement with his message about how Arma should be a beacon, a shining example of what a good game can be. In fact, the only thing I disagree with Viper is that the sexiest plane ever made is not the F-16. I admit, it is a very cool plane, one that kicks ass long after everyone thought it wouldn't, 50 years after its introduction, one that I still have a giant wallpaper of strapped to the door of my old room back in my parents' house. But come on bro, everyone knows that the F-14 is the sexiest machine ever made by man. That plane is just perfection in mechanical form. Now I can continue to talk about Viper for hours on end, but I think you guys want me to cover more points in this Iceberg, so let's move on to the next point. Operation Flashpoint Cold War Crisis. Operation Flashpoint was the game that started it all. It was a revolutionary game released in 2001 where there was no game like it on the market, and it laid down the foundations for the milsim genre as we know it today without even realizing it. First, it's all about the freedom. The island of Everon was several kilometers long and wide, and I don't remember any game that had such huge maps at a time that allowed the player to roam around in it. Complete freedom, no loading screens, no invisible walls, just absolute total freedom. This made the insane difficulty of the Spec Ops missions from the campaign easier because you could approach the target from any angle you chose, use high ground to your advantage to try and take out enemies silently or view their patrol patterns. And speaking of the campaign, it was revolutionary too, to say the least. The writing was superb for a game made in the Czech Republic at the end of the 90s. The story begins with an unknown enemy invading a fictional island of Everon, one in a chain of 4 islands you'll do battle with or do battle on during the campaign. You play as 4 US soldiers throughout the campaign, which is built as if each tells their own side of the story and their experiences in turn. These are the infantryman, the tanker, the helicopter pilot turned A-10 pilot, and James motherfucking Gustavsky, the Spec Ops guy whose missions border on the absolute insane, and I indeed will to this day hold anyone that completed all of his missions without using cheat codes in the highest regards, for he has won over the Dark Souls level difficulty in a first-person shooter game. This is what gaming legends are made of. During the story, you will actually get to know a whole cast of characters, some of which will not survive to the end of the war, and this really hits me hard when I first played it as a kid. Like how during the campaign I met a resistance commander who you can feel his grief, his anger at the loss of his families at the hands of the Russians, and then you learn to respect that man and look to him as a real warrior, cold and calculated, only to hear that he later died in the campaign, and that bit hit me really hard and I was caught completely off guard by this. The game itself, regardless of the campaign, is absolutely brutal. One of the main features of Operation Flashpoint, which made it stand out, is if you get shot, you most likely die. This, combined with the fact that you can only save your progression once per mission, really gave you a sense of dread and activated survival mechanics in my brain that I didn't know I had. Each firefight was frightening. You won't always know from where you're going to be fired at, or when the stray bullets will hit you. Enemy units can and will arrive from different directions. A built-in probability mechanic means that certain patrols will have certain chance of spawning. This means that every time you play some kind of mission, the enemy numbers, locations, and patrol paths are completely random. I have played most of the campaign missions several times, and I could swear that 1 in 3 times the enemies came from an unexpected direction. The game also made me develop certain skills I never knew I had, like how most weapons have basic iron sights, so you're engaging enemies at 100, 100 50 meters away using iron sights, and yet somehow after hours of gameplay you became a real marksman without a scope, which is something you just don't get in modern games. Same goes for using rocket launchers, since if you engage an enemy tank you have to hit it the first time to preserve your well-being and not turn into a red paste from a 120mm shell landing on your head. Lastly, the game comes with a built-in editor, a staple feature for all ARMA games. In the editor you can pit forces against one another, create spectacle battles between dozens of tanks, recreate missions from the campaign with the odds stacked in your favor, and do all sorts of shenanigans. For instance, the game comes with a giant LSD ship, and one of the times I wanted to see just how many explosives placed at its bottom would take to actually fly it into orbit. The resulting nuclear explosion was extremely fun to pull off, and same goes for putting explosive behind a jeep, entering it, and then exploding. I swear, seeing that jeep on your dev screen being flown into low orbit was always a joy. It was a game of infinite possibilities in an era where both hardware and software were a real limiting factor, so no surprise that it created one of the biggest and most early modding scenes the internet has ever seen. By 2007, 6 years later after the release, you already had a huge selection of mods that add new tanks, new islands, new armies, weapons, planes, even science fiction factions, as well as countless user-made scenarios and campaigns. One scenario and one campaign that always come to mind, at least for me, are the last months in Vietnam and Zombie Outbreak Simulator. Zombie Outbreak Simulator is a scenario where you have a small force of just 12 soldiers, some trucks and Humvees, and must evacuate as many civilians from the giant island filled with population centers. Every minute that or more that these towns or cities are not evacuated, they might fall into the hands of the undead. So the race is on to try and save as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time. Last Months in Vietnam is a full-fledged campaign that is set in, well, in Vietnam. You are a new transfer for the Special Forces base and are tasked with conducting special operations in enemy territory. This includes manning listening posts, doing patrols, conducting combat search and rescue of downed pilots, calling in airstrikes on enemy supply stashes, and participating in large-scale, sometimes even combined armor operations against the VC and NVA in tough jungle conditions where it's more likely that the enemy will spot you before you spot them. Also, I mentioned the mods, so I just wanted to add that a lot of modders that created some of the best content for ARMA 3 created basically their entire careers out of modding Operation Flashpoint. That is the Red Hammer Studios that started modding in 2003 and made some of the best quality add-ons for ARMA 3, and also the Unsung mod, which survived from its origins in Operation Flashpoint all the way into becoming basically a DLC for ARMA 3. There is also the Ryan's Zombies and Demons mod, which has its origins in the, how is it called, the Farmland Horror mod for Operation Flashpoint. So really, a lot of modders that started their careers in Operation Flashpoint are still making mods for ARMA 3. I can go on and on about this game, but it's time we move on to another entry. ARMA 1. Armed Assault 1 is the first project Bohemia made after their split with Codemasters, who helped develop Operation Flashpoint. The story of ARMA 1 tells the tale of a group of US Marines sent as advisors to a giant island cut between two warring factions. On the island of Saarani exist two diametrically opposed governments with two completely opposing ideologies. To the south lay the Kingdom of Saarani, a pro-West government and its armed forces are known as the Royal Army Corps of Saarani, a Western-style built army from a variety of Western-built vehicles and weapons, giving the RACS a wide range of capabilities to tackle whatever mission that needs to be completed. To the north lay the Democratic Republic of Saarani, a poor Soviet-style dictatorship that has modeled its army, called the Saarani Liberation Army, in accordance with Warsaw Pact doctrine and using old Warsaw Pact vehicles such as T-72s, BMPs, MiGs, and one fictional fighter jet that doesn't really exist, but if you understand where this jet is from, you're both an absolute legend and also probably someone above the age of 30. So the story goes that the US-led peacekeeping operation is coming to an end in the south portion of the island, which is let's just say a recurring theme in the ARMA franchise, leaving a small contingent of American forces to be withdrawn. Sensing a weakness because of the lack of available US firepower, the SLA invades the south in force, driving back the RACS and the US allies all the way to the international airport, where a last stand battle is made. Unable to break the south defenses and with a massive US aerial train of reinforcements that soon arrives, the SLA are pushed back all the way to their own capital city in the north, who later falls to the US and the kingdom, ultimately uniting Saarani once and for all. The story about the creation of ARMA 1 was that of absolute necessity. After breaking up with Codemasters due to Bohemia not making enough headway on a Operation Flashpoint sequel named simply as Game 2, Bohemia got to keep all the technology assets they developed for that sequel, but they lost the rights to the Operation Flashpoint franchise name, meaning all future sales revenue would go to Codemasters and not Bohemia. Thankfully, ARMA 1 sold reasonably well, with about 400,000 units sold by 2010, keeping Bohemia afloat long enough to release its much more successful sequel, ARMA 2. Also, something to note is that 3 out of 4 ARMA games, i.e. Cold War Crisis, which was later redistributed as ARMA Cold War Crisis, ARMA 1 and ARMA 2, all had Soviet-styled or Soviet-backed forces as opposing forces. This is probably due to the fact that the main founders of Bohemia, the Spandel brothers, grew up in a Soviet-controlled Czechoslovakia, and this is basically their way of getting back at the repressive regime they grew up in the 90s, or the 80s to be precise. And now that we're finally done with the whole ARMA history franchise, let us continue to our next point and dive even deeper into this iceberg. Rimu Down Under. Remy is another YouTuber and content creator that sits on the other side of the ARMA spectrum. Instead of serious style gameplay, Remy is best known for doing ARMA comedy, where all sorts of crazy things happen during missions that will keep you laughing from start to finish. His Foster Cluck series has millions of views, and he has gathered an entire community around him over the years. I can't say I'm a regular viewer of his content, but still, you should definitely check him out if you want a good laugh seeing how crazy and fun ARMA can be. Also, he likes to use mods most milsim groups avoid, like Warhammer 40k mods where titans roam the battlefields and space marines blast each other with bolters. Also, he seems to have diversified his content, now also having videos from Ready or Not among other games, so again, I recommend that you go over to his channel and enjoy. And now we are already talking about ARMA content creators, so I have a few quick mentions. Dyslexy. Dyslexia has created a lot of ARMA related content over the years. He has built up an entire series about how to conduct operations depending on the role that you play in ARMA. For instance, he has tutorials to show you how to act like a true guerrilla force, how to conduct CQB effectively, and also helicopter pilot training or piloting tutorials, which he did while actually taking helicopter flight lessons in real life. He also has a tutorial that shows you how much penetration different calibers have in Arma 3 depending on what cover material you're shooting at what range, and at what angle. He has made a series of videos called Serious Fun, where he usually plays with the rest of his clan, Shack Tactical, as a CAS asset, helping large group of players conduct open warfare on wide fronts across entire maps, often responding to several hotspots and calls from real players for close air support. Also, either he or someone from his group made the all-famous Shack Tactical UI mod that every other group in ARMA probably uses in existence, basically. He has several features that mostly allow easy division of troops to red team, blue team, etc., and easy identification of anyone in those teams to keep the guess which team the guy in front of you is part of to a minimum. Another content creator, and dare I say probably the funniest guy to ever make content for ARMA, is J Raptor, known as Rubik's Raptor from the Ingis Core clan. He and his bunch of merry men have fought on every front that you can think of in any universe ARMA has mods for. His first video that I saw was about MTF forces from the SCP universe going into a forest which never ends well for them, trying to revert a situation where another universe is spilling into our own. And every night, Web Knights and Devour King's monsters, which are absolutely frightening and extremely tough to kill conventionally, descend upon the unsuspecting humans. In another video, they did a zombie apocalypse in the jungles of Vietnam, which is one of the funniest videos I've ever seen on YouTube, period. They also fought the Confederacy droids as Jedi warriors, conducted countless assaults against Chaos forces both in Arma Fantasy and Warhammer 40k franchises, invaded Iraq to fight off an alien invasion somehow. They tried to resist the Chimera in the Resistance Fall of Man operations and fought the Covenant for the defense of New Mombasa, which quickly became a slaughterhouse, just to name a few. Wherever I think of, I want a funny video to pass my time, I search Rubik's Raptor, and I highly recommend that you check his videos and become addicted to them as well. Also, two honorable mentions that I couldn't elaborate much, otherwise this video will be about 5 hours long, is Operator Drewski, which is just an awesome guy, Jester 814, which also is awesome for both his Arma 3 and Arma Reforger content. Both he and Operator Drewski have both Arma 3 and Arma Reforger content that I highly recommend that you check out. And Leotin09, which is one of the first Arma content creators I've ever seen regularly. He has this mission of a Chernobyl patrol where he scares a group of players with zombies in pitch black ruins of Pripyat. It's one of the first zombie missions I've ever seen for Arma, and it's absolutely fantastic. He is much more known today for his in-depth series about the lore of Warhammer 40k, though through his videos I learned everything I know about the Warhammer 40k universe. So please check all these guys out. It's been so much fun seeing them all, and this is my chance to tell them all thank you for all the hours you spent capturing and editing and uploading. This video is my way of giving you guys back again, saying thank you for everything after all of the hours of fun that your videos gave me and entertained me. So yeah, now we stop being a bit emotional, and in a quick transition we are now going to dive into level 3 And let's move into the next entry. ARMA 4 releasing in 2027. Apparently, ARMA 4 is already in development and is currently slated for 2027, as Bohemia disclosed in 2024. It is possible that Bohemia is taking their time with the fourth installment so as to refine the infusion engine and features that are currently part of Reforger. This is done so that they could in the future copy and paste it for ARMA 4, massively speeding up development times without the need to construct completely new assets and game engine for ARMA 4. Another added bonus of ironing out the kinks in Reforger is that unlike other companies, and yes Bethesda, I am looking at you, bugs from Reforger hopefully won't move on to ARMA 4 and the game will run much smoother on launch than otherwise. PUBG started as an ARMA free mod. As unlikely as it sounds, PUBG, the game who broke the multiplayer market with its battle royale gameplay that spawned so many competitors and clones over the last decade, started out as a modded server for ARMA 3. Brandon PlayerUnknown Green took inspiration from both a movie called Battle Royale and another highly popular mod turned into a standalone game at the time, DayZ, and started gaining experience in mod making as early as the start of the 2010s. In ARMA 3, the concept evolved to what it is today, where players are airdropped into a map and must scavenge for weapons and supplies while eliminating the competition. This mod is a direct precursor to the standalone game that was later developed by South Korea's Bluehole in association and consultation with Green, which helped turn his vision into a highly successful financial win. ARMA is used for fake war footage. ARMA 3 has been used periodically to produce fake war footage on various wars that raged in the last decade, and some continue to rage still, much like the Ghost of Kiev story, which was found to be an actual footage taken from another simulation game called DCS. So too, people have been using ARMA for fake footage and propaganda for misinformation campaigns. You can tell the video is fake as most of the shots are in the twilight hours, and if you look into the far areas of the footage you will see a bare terrain without trees and weird terrain or building features, which is a classic ARMA engine trope, as the engine only renders what is close to the viewer. Cases of actual wars that people have made fake ARMA footage for include the Russia-Ukraine war, the Israel-Hamas war, the India-Pakistan war, and even some videos were made during the Syrian civil war, which, to be frank, I don't understand why people would even do this, because we live in a time where everyone has a camera in their pocket and internet connection to share videos and online 24/7 directly from the front. There are so many real videos of this conflict that depict death and destruction that I just cannot fathom why would anyone would even make these videos, other than maybe trying to project a picture of victory. It appears that the biggest surge of such videos happened in the first few years of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, leading Bohemia itself in November of 2022 to come out publicly and say they don't endorse this and ask politely for people to stop. Despite this, it seems that such videos are still being made and uploaded to the internet from time to time. ARMA 2 footage used as an IRA documentary. Apparently, in 2011, an ITV documentary about the deposed despot Gaddafi from Libya was aired on British television. The documentary, Exposure Gaddafi and the IRA, was about the support for the IRA given to them by Muammar el-Gaddafi, the despot again of Libya from something like the 1950s. Anyway, so what they were showing is his support to the IRA in the 1980s. In it, the makers of the doco showed a clip where they claim was filmed in 1988, where IRA soldiers shot down a British helicopter using weaponry they bought from Gaddafi. However, not far after airing the documentary, gamers noticed that it was not real footage but footage from ARMA 2 and alerted the public about this. Soon after, ITV came with an apology about the incident, and this led Ofcom, the British TV regulator, to investigate it, stating that ITV breached the public's trust and that the program was materially misleading. Now, just a side note, the IRA did manage to shoot down a British helicopter in 1988, but it wasn't the model shown in the documentary, and there are several other deviations from the real incident and what was shown in the documentary. Mark Spanier, I'm not going to say this name correctly, I'm sorry, from Bohemia, said that it felt like a bizarre appreciation for ARMA 2's realism, but was not sure how ITV even managed to make such an error. The ITV documentary has since been taken down, but a lot of Reddit posts on the internet still exist to remind people that even the media, despite being regulated constantly, can unknowingly make mistakes. Which is, to be frank, I don't even know if it's mostly unknowingly. Some of the times I'm sure it is knowingly. Anyways, that's all for level 3. Now let's keep descending into the more controversial parts of the ARMA franchise in level 4. Codemasters and Bohemia disputes. We talked about this in the ARMA 1 entry as well as in Operation Flashpoint entry. Originally, Operation Flashpoint was developed by Bohemia and published by Codemasters. After Operation Flashpoint launched to a critical acclaim, Codemasters wanted more, promoting Bohemia to start working on a sequel dubbed Game 2. Development of Game 2 proved difficult for the then small dev team of Bohemia, and after failing to meet several deadlines, Codemasters signaled Bohemia that they want out of their agreement. As I stated before, Bohemia got all the tech and assets for Game 2, but could not earn cash from the Operation Flashpoint brand, the one title everyone knew them for. And so Bohemia created the ARMA series instead, and the rest is history, as they say. But the old colleagues turned adversaries were not about to let Bohemia enjoy a monopoly over the milsim genre without a fight. In 2007, development for ARMA 2 was well underway when Bohemia heard about an upcoming title they feared they would have to go toe-to-toe against one day. Codemasters were making a sequel to Operation Flashpoint, dubbed Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising. Now, to be clear, I did play Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising at the time, and I must say it felt like a very bland game compared to ARMA. In the campaign, instead of having missions with dozens of guys covering you and charging the enemy in set-piece battles, in Operation Flashpoint 2 it was all about running a kilometer to a godforsaken village, shooting like 3 or 4 Chinese soldiers, then running another kilometer to some kind of an outpost, shooting a few more Chinese soldiers, then boom, mission complete. It felt very monotonous and it felt very boring, not helped by the fact that the majority of the ARMA modding base stayed in ARMA, ultimately keeping Operation Flashpoint 2 on ARMA 2's backside when it came out. And although both games sold relatively well, it was all uphill for ARMA from this point forward and all downhill for Operation Flashpoint. And in the test of time, ARMA triumphed over its adversary, proving once and for all that Bohemia are the masters of the milsim genre. ARMA 3 is banned in Iran. Well, I don't really think I need to explain this much. CSAT, the main antagonists of ARMA 3, are mainly made up of Iranians speaking Farsi and wielding Iranian weapons like the KH-2002 as their main assault rifle, which is the main assault rifle for the current Iranian army. A quick note here is that oddly enough they also use the Negev, which is an Israeli LMG, but that's probably because it was new back in 2013 and not many people heard about it, and Bohemia looked for exotic futuristic weapons to fill CSAT's roster with, and it's just a small, funny and kind of weird oversight that I had nowhere else to place, so there it is. Anyways, due to this, and probably not wanting to look like the bad guys to its people, which to be frank the current Iranian regime is already doing just fine, even without video games depicting them as the bad guys, it's obvious why, just like Battlefield 3, which also depicted a future conflict with Iran and was also banned in Iran, so is ARMA 3 is banned in Iran. Bohemia devs arrested for espionage. Apparently, in 2012, during the late development phase of ARMA 3, a news story broke out. One about two devs who were arrested by the Greek police on accounts of espionage because they drove around the island of Lemnos, which is the real-life inspiration for Altis, and took a lot of pictures. The Greek police knew they were taking pictures for use in a military game, but were not convinced that it's not a form of espionage, as they claimed the two took pictures of military installations while being on vacation on the island. The two poor devs were finally released after 129 days in prison, after their bail of 5,000 euros each was paid. News media claimed that the pair could have faced a sentence of up to 20 years in prison, and in 2017 were convicted by a Greek court that they were in fact spies, giving them suspended prison sentences. Let's just say that these two devs are not going to be vacating anywhere near Greece or her islands ever again. VBS4. VBS4 is a whole Earth simulator, the latest in battle simulation technology from Bohemia Interactive Simulations, and one that can simulate any training scenario imaginable anywhere on the planet. Understandably, software such as this is usually reserved for use with actual militaries such as the US Marines to build virtual training environments for those destined to become frontline forces. VBS series started after the much talked about Bohemia Codemasters split, when Bohemia had no revenue source. Desperate for funds, Bohemia realized that armies including NATO and the US Armed Forces were impressed with the level of realism and simulation of Operation Flashpoint, and asked if a training software based on that game can be made for their forces. Bohemia obliged, creating a subdivision inside the company known as Bohemia Interactive Simulations, and funds finally started pouring in from contracts to these organizations that kept Bohemia's head above sea level long enough to launch ARMA 1. Codemasters thought that taking the rights to Operation Flashpoint would land a death stroke on Bohemia, but luckily for us, Bohemia were stubborn enough to not give up in a moment of desperation. One can only imagine the grim implications of what would have happened to the genre as a whole had Bohemia gone under in this moment of crisis. Alright, we are done with level 4, and now we entered the final level, which is weirdly enough also the shortest level of them all. Level 5. Hundreds of ARMA mods are now lost media. What I think this refers to is the closure of the fan favorite site and the main focal point for all ARMA modding for many years, Armaholic. Before Steam Workshop integration, the internet was flooded with mods. Some were published on ModDB, some were published on Gamefront, and others were published in other sites. What the community wanted the most, however, is a singular location from which ARMA mods could be uploaded to and downloaded from, regardless of whether it's for Operation Flashpoint, ARMA 1, ARMA 2, or even ARMA 3. And yes, ARMA 3 had mods posted on Armaholic before, and because again, it didn't have workshop support from the get-go, at least as far as I'm aware of. However, it appears that over time, the admins maintaining the site managed to anger the community quite a few times. Some say that the admins re-uploaded mods without permission from the original creators. Others point to the admins not adding paid options to the site, but rather removing options for free users and adding them only to paid users. One Reddit user said he lost faith in Armaholic when its admins kept a scenario that took inspiration from a real-world mass shooting event, in which the player is tasked with gunning down as many civilians as possible, and the admins dug their heels when the community raged over this and asked them to remove the scenario file from the server. As for me, in my opinion, why Armaholic really got shut down is simply because it could not compete with the Steam Workshop, which was easier to download mods from and upload mods to. It also showed links to all dependencies so that users could download them as well in one click instead of having to find and download each dependency individually. And of course, Steam Workshop also installs said downloads automatically, which is a big quality of life improvement compared to the alternative. The closure of Armaholic was bad news for the community despite everything else. While most mods for ARMA 3 content was uploaded to the workshop, many ARMA 1 and ARMA 2 mods were deleted when Armaholic was shut down. Too much time have passed. Too many mods whose creators are no longer interested in maintaining or have lost the original files over the years were kept in the Armaholic servers. And when the plug was pulled, they were lost with it. Today, ARMA 3's content more than makes up for such losses, as the community keeps making fresh new mods almost daily. But we can't allow ourselves to forget what is basically the burning of the Library of Alexandria for the ARMA franchise, so that we would make sure it won't happen again. Tencent has a share of Bohemia. Excuse me, I don't really understand why is this on the iceberg, or what this thing might imply to. Bohemia has a reputation of 20 years plus of commitment to realism, commitment to the community that grew around the franchise, so I don't really see how Tencent can change any of this. So instead, I'm making a bonus entry for the iceberg, one that actually deserves a spot, and that is ARMA 3 Laws of War. Laws of War is a very unique ARMA DLC, one that is added on September 2017. It follows the story of Nathan McDade, a veteran turned bomb defusal expert working for IDAP, which is ARMA's version of the UN basically, as he talks with the AAN reporter about the battle that took place in a town not many ARMA players ever knew existed, Orio Castro. Because of its remote location, Orio Castro was an almost natural pick as a hideout for the FIA guerrillas during the war. Not long after, however, the AAF found out and a large battle ensued. Nathan is tasked with first clearing the road leading to Orio Castro of mines left behind by the FIA, then move into the town to try and demine it. On the way there are flashback points that showcase how the town was before the war, briefly before going to the present, a pristine town where children laughter can be heard before the battle, versus the grim state of utter ruin after it. In addition, other flashpoints serve as campaign missions, taking the story back and playing the same events through the eyes of several characters. First is the NATO representative that drops supplies to the town. Second is the FIA guerrilla that laid the mines on the road you just demined. Then Spec Ops mission who showcases the effects of cluster munitions as they rain down an airstrike on the town, etc., etc. Each mission is unique and slowly moves the story forward, the scale of the tragedy slowly unfolding before you. Some missions even allow the player choices, like if you pick up a gun during the battle, you will be considered hostile and shot, but if not, you will be considered a non-combatant and would have to dodge bullets between both sides who are actively fighting one another for control of the town. The writing is absolutely superb. It is so surprising to find such a masterpiece of storytelling in the most unlikely of games, a milsim sandbox, and yet there it is. If you have to pick one DLC out of all the others, pick this. Not only you get a full-length campaign, unlike the others which only offer mini campaigns or mission generator scenarios, here it's a full-fledged campaign with all its details. You get superb voice acting, cutscene, effects, and a gripping story. It also shows you another side of the war you never see in any other first-person shooter game, the side of what happens after the war. Everyone is always rushing to the fight, rushing to kill, rushing to blow things up. But what happens after? You got roads to clear, you got homes to demolish and rebuild, you have leftover munitions to remove, you have bodies to bury, you have refugees to take care of as their home and basically all their lives got turned into dust in a moment. This DLC is absolutely inspired by the Syrian civil war, and yet it is absolutely worth it. This one is far above in storytelling than anything you ever experienced in the ARMA franchise, and possibly on par with the main story of Operation Flashpoint, which again was a triumph of storytelling. Alright, so that is the end of this Iceberg, and I must say it's been quite a ride. I hope you guys found this video entertaining, and if you did, why not subscribe? I do plan on making more Iceberg videos for other games, maybe Stalker, maybe even on the end of that road we'll do an Iceberg for Star Wars, which is, I don't know, it's like a thesis more than a video. Anyways, so write me in the comments below if you have any suggestion for future videos or future Icebergs. Don't forget the subscribe button to stay tuned, and hopefully I will see you in future videos.